Welcome back. This is John again, and this is video number 4 in our series on preserving food, putting up food. So we've talked about why you'll do it in video 1. Video 2, we talked about fermentation. Video 3, we talked about dehydrating and drying food to make it more storable, shelf stable. And today we're going to talk about a modern technique for storing food, and that's going to be freezing. It is a semi-grid dependent technique, no doubt, but freezing food is an exceptionally valuable technique. Now there are examples, if you are someone who lives far enough north, of cultures freezing food, because they lived far enough from the equator that doing it off-grid was completely possible and doable. So Eskimos, a number of other cultures and indigenous people groups would freeze meat and other foods in well-known places that would stay frozen most of, if not all, the year. Take advantage of those foods. But for the rest of us, cold storage technology, refrigerators, freezers, no doubt, no debate, they are a grid-based solution to storing food, but they are a really valuable and a very useful one. And let's face it, because they're grid-based, they are one of the easiest compared to canning, dehydrating, fermenting. Freezing something is easy. Cut it up, throw it in a bag or a container, throw it in the freezer, you got food. And so freezing is just such a simple technique. And freezing, unlike especially canning and drying, you lose a lot less nutritional value on top of having a lot less work involved. Obviously, though, there's that trade-off. But now you're dealing with a method of food preservation that's semi-grid dependent, where if the grid goes down, you're going to have a way to back up your freezers. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But especially for a large family, the value of a freezer for storing particular types of food, and a freezer's value in an emergency, especially a lot of the more common emergencies most of us are going to face, is pretty high. And buffering yourself against what you do if you're without power for a few days and have a freezer, deep freezer, isn't really that big of a nut to crack in most situations. So it's a trade-off you're going to have to decide, but it's one for us. It plays a part in our overall food security, food storage, food preservation plan, and it's one that we want you to be able to do well and do wisely. So frozen foods have a number of benefits. Again, one of them I mentioned is, for the most part, you preserve more nutrients than through other methods of food preservation. A second one is, most frozen foods are closer to consumption or already ready to be consumed, compared to dehydrated foods or things. So when we're freezing peppers to put up for use over the winter, when we're freezing a lot of other vegetables, they've already been cut, they've already been cored, they've already been seeded. Some of them will have already been blanched, which is a process where you take a vegetable and you dip it in boiling water just for 30 seconds or so. You're not trying to cook it, you're just trying to blanch it. And this deactivates enzymes, it kills off surface bacteria and other things that can still actually be active and spoil food in your freezer. And so, blanching, we've blanched and not blanched, it all depends on how busy we are. Especially if you're hoping to freeze food for an extended period of time, you're not going to get to it for 9 months, a year. Blanching is definitely the way to go with it, with a lot of vegetables, especially, and some fruits. If you're going to use things sooner, then you can stick with only blanching items that are known and really need to be and have to be blanched in order to then freeze them and make them stay good and stay unspoiled in the freezer. But it's a good thing to realize, stuff can spoil in the freezer. It can spoil because of the action of enzymes and even certain bacterial species and other stuff. But things can also do what's known as freezer burn. So freezer burn is basically what happens when something is packed with too much air or it's packed with too much moisture, and then your freezer's temperature fluctuates some, and over time it ends up damaging and degrading the quality of that food. Freezer burn is a real common problem with meat, and so it's a thing to watch out for. The way you prevent that is obviously making sure that when you pack things to be frozen, there's not a bunch of extra moisture at play in the packaging material. Or if you're doing meat and things, make sure you pack them tightly. This is one of the drawbacks to the old-fashioned butcher paper as opposed to modern vac packing. Butcher paper just isn't going to be that tight. And this is also one of the reasons why we prefer chest freezers to upright freezers. So foods in upright freezers, because when you open the door, you have a complete turnover of all of the cold air, all of the airspace, unlike a chest freezer. That air turnover is more likely to create condensation and change for the foods in the freezer. So we like a chest freezer. It takes a bit more skill to manage and the like, but the foods in a chest freezer are going to stay unfreezer burned and in better condition a whole lot longer than an upright. Another reason we prefer a chest freezer over an upright freezer is in an emergency, a chest freezer is going to stay colder longer without additional energy input than an upright. And you're going to be able to get in and out of it more often with less loss of cold and longer time of the food staying good for you in there. So if you can get your hands on a chest freezer, I prefer chest freezers immensely over upright freezers. A chest freezer is also way less expensive to run. So when we did numbers comparisons years ago with some friends, we ran energy bills and tracked, and then I think a few of us also did that inline voltmeter. A chest freezer is only going to run you $10, maybe $15 a month to run, and that's for a 15 to 20 cubic foot size chest freezer. An upright freezer will often run you 2 to 3 times that. So it's a lot more expensive to preserve food in an upright freezer than in a chest freezer. So I'd suggest if you're going to use freezing as part of your food storage and food plan, get a chest freezer, learn how to manage it well, because it can become just the bin of doom. We've probably all been there if you've ever dealt with a chest freezer where you look down and you're just rooting through 3 solid feet deep of who knows what. And so one way we've helped solve chest freezer organization issues is by using milk crates or other bins inside of the chest freezer and organizing those by either product type or we'll have a milk crate with just all of our easy meats, lunch meats, ground beef, stuff like that. Milk crate that's all frozen fruit, milk crate that's all frozen vegetables, and it makes managing the deep freezer a whole lot easier, especially if you have one that doesn't have the divider system. So how do you freeze foods? Just want to give some tips if you've never freezed foods before, because a lot of people don't realize, depending on the food you're freezing, certain things that were easy to do with a fresh food are going to be very difficult once it's been frozen, because when a food freezes, icicles form inside of the food, inside the moisture inside of the individual cells. Those form ice crystals that punctures the cell structure. That's why frozen foods cook faster than fresh foods, because they've undergone some degradation of their cellular structure. And so you're not going to be able to cut them as easily. You're not going to be able to make use of them as easily or further process them as easily as if they were fresh. So a lot of foods, before we put them into the freezer, we're going to completely process them and get them as close to what we want for final use as possible. So I think I mentioned peppers earlier. When we're putting up peppers in the freezer, we're going to wash them. We're going to cut out any bad spots. We're going to core them. And then we're either going to slice them or dice them, depending on what their final purpose is later on. You know, one way to make working with foods later easier is instead of freezing fruits and vegetables, you know, right in a big freezer bag, where then you probably had, you know, it becomes one big solid brick of frozen stuff that you're chipping away at. We'll often use cookie sheets lined with parchment paper. So parchment paper you can get at any store. So it keeps your cookie sheets cleaner. Parchment paper can just be rinsed, keeps things. And we'll spread things out that we're freezing on a number of cookie sheets, set them in the top of the deep freezer. And you know, basically it's like a low-tech way to do individually quick frozen. So when I was younger, freezing technology hadn't moved that far along. And so you'd buy frozen fruits and vegetables. They'd just be big, solid bricks of stuff. You know, nowadays you buy a bag of frozen strawberries and all the strawberries are pretty loose because they individually quick freeze. Well, this is how you individually quick freeze at home. It's another benefit of a chest freezer because that little bit of empty space often that you have in the very top of a chest freezer, you can use to individually quick freeze things before you put them into the bags. Another tip, when you put things into a freezer bag, or if you're using another type of container in the freezer for stuff, make sure you put the date. So, especially if you're going to be putting up stuff over the course of a number of months, you really want to, you know, date things as they go into the freezer so that you can follow good, you know, first in, first out FIFO inventory management. You know, there's nothing like finding 3-year-old frozen vegetables in the bottom of your freezer that are doing nothing but taking up space and losing any and all taste and nutritional value. So make sure, you know, you bag and tag things. Not a bad idea if you're dealing with a couple freezers, a really large family, or you just want to put up a whole lot of food this way. You know, at that point, you may even want to keep a notebook and track what's in which freezer so that you know what you have available and know when stuff should be used by, so that, you know, you're putting up food which is meant to save money, save time, and be a form of insurance. It doesn't become a big loss because you're having stuff expire and spoil and otherwise become inedible in the bottom of your freezer. So bag and tag stuff, you can individually quick freeze things, and you know, and then manage your inventory well when you freeze things. Because again, especially if you're doing a chest freezer, that's usually the biggest problem, the biggest drawback with it. One of the other reasons we really like our chest freezer, and we find freezing to be useful, is it gives us access to, you know, basically still really yummy, but completely ready to eat other than reheat meals. So one thing we try and always keep in our freezer is a number of soups and stews. So these are really filling, really nourishing. They can be reheated on the wood stove in an emergency. And this gives us things that, you know, are things we normally eat anyway. So if we're going through an emergency, we're without power, we're getting bad storms, you know, it's just been a really challenging few weeks around the farmer homestead, we can pull some easy meals, take advantage of those without spending a lot of money bringing in fast food or low quality or really expensive high quality prepared foods, or an emergency. You know, it just lets us not have to spend a lot of time foraging, gathering, processing. You have food that's ready to eat. Just pull it out, make use of it, eat it, take advantage of it so that you have more time and energy for other tasks that might be a higher priority in an emergency situation or kind of when you're bugged in. So freezers have a lot of advantages. You know, we touched on some of the drawbacks, you know, just needing to be good inventory management. One important thing to note, especially with frozen fruits and vegetables, this is another time where freezing does cause the loss of certain nutrients. And the one that really struck me when looking at this issue is folate. Folate, as you're probably aware, really crucial nutrient, especially important for pregnant women. preventing birth defects. And frozen fruits and vegetables, I believe it's anywhere over the course of around 3 to 6 months, lose basically all of their folate value. So if you're thinking in terms of emergency food preparedness and stuff, or you're just thinking of putting up a lot of your food, it's just a good consideration. You're going to lose folate and lose some other nutrients by freezing. You're also going to lose some of these nutrients through dehydrating and drying and some other methods of storage as well, canning and the like. Meat is the exception here. Studies show that meat, when frozen, really resists giving up almost any of its nutritional value. So if you're putting up, meat in a freezer, you're not going to lose the kind of nutritional value that you are with fruits and vegetables. And it's just a great thing to know. One of the reasons, hunting and then freezing some of the meat from hunting really does make a great deal of sense as a way to cut into the grocery bill, put up highly nutritious and versatile food for you and your family. So hope this introduction to freezing food for preparedness has been helpful. Again, it's just another tool in the toolkit of dehydrating, fermenting, freezing. And in the coming videos, we're going to hit on a few more different ways we put up food to feed our family and be ready in an emergency.